Masechet Kiddushin Daf Lamed He. We're looking for the source that Misvot Aseh Shazman Gerama Nashim Peturot. Where do we find a source that all time-bound positive commandments women are exempt? So we saw that we can find a source from Tefillin and Re'iyah. Even though these are two commandments, and generally the law is you don't learn something from two commandments, but we show that these are necessary. So women are exempt from Tefillin, they're exempt from Re'iyah, meaning coming on pilgrimage. We need both of them because one of them we couldn't learn one from the other, and so that is a paradigm. On the other hand, there are exceptions, it's true, and so eating matzah on Pesach and Hakel, these are time-bound mitzvot, and women are obligated, but these are two Shnei Ketubim Habayim Kehad, and therefore they are exceptional, right? They are in fact extraneous. We could learn one from the other, so the Torah doesn't have to say both matzah and hakel, and therefore the fact that the Torah says both of them means we do not use them as a paradigm. So far so good. We have tefillin and re'iyah; those come together to make a paradigm because they're both necessary. Matzah, and those are exempt. Matzah and hakel, women are obligated, but those do not make a paradigm because they are Shnei Ketuvim Habayim Kehad, and we could have learned one from the other. That's where we are so far. Now we ask the question, that's okay for the opinion that says en melamdin, but we're about to see there's another opinion that says melamdin, that when you have two verses, even though you can learn one from the other, still you can use it as a paradigm. So now we have a paradigm from Matzah and Hakel that women are obligated, and so this is not going to work as a source. So this is one question that we left open yesterday. Now, before we answer that, we're going to raise another question regarding the other category, Vitu. Misvot aseh shelo hazman gerama nashim chayavot minelan. What's the source that women are obligated to positive commandments that are not time-bound? Dialif mimora, ma mora nashim chayavot, avkol misvot aseh shelo hazman gerama nashim chayavot. We can use a binyan av and derive it from fear of parents, right? Ish, imo, v'aviv, tira'u is in plural. Women have to fear, honor also their parents. And so too, that's not time bound. You have to do that all the time. And that is a paradigm. Good. Now, v'nelaf mitamud Torah. And we ask, why are you using that as a paradigm? Why not use Talmud Torah as a paradigm, which also applies all the time, and women are exempt, and maybe we should learn that women are exempt from all such mitzvot? And the answer is Mishum Tahavele Talmud Torah Ufiriyah B'Riviyah Shnei Ketuvim B'Mim Kehad V'Shol Shnei Ketuvim B'Mim Kehad and Melamedin, because there is another mitzvah taseh that is not time bound, and that's the mitzvah to have children, where ironically enough, it's the men are primarily commanded to go and make sure they go get a wife, have children. They need women for that, but the women are not the subject of the obligation. And so here we have also Piriyah V'Ribiyah, and since you have Talmud Torah and Piriyah V'Ribiyah, so these are two paradigms. When you have two examples of something, so then why would you need two? The Torah is giving you two to say that these are the only two exceptions, and you cannot derive anything else from that. Good. And now again, this whole line of questioning is according to the opinion that says en milamdin. So we're covering that base first, and then we'll see according to the other opinion. Now, but before we get to that, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka damar shnehem hu omer vayibarech otam Elohim. Regarding Peru Urvu, there is a minority opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka who says, look, Hashem gave a blessing, and he understands it not just as a blessing, but as a commandment. Vaybarech otam. Hashem told both the first man and first woman, both of you must procreate, be fruitful, multiply. So women are obligated in Peru Urvu as well. According to that, so Peru Urvu, they are obligated. So you don't have two Ketuvim Abim Kehad, you have just Talmud Torah. Why not use that as a paradigm that all Misvot Aseh Shelo Hazman Gerama, women are exempt like Talmud Torah? And the answer is, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka has another source, Mishum Tava Talmud Torah Ufijon Haben Shnei Ketuvim Kehad V'chol Shnei Ketuvim B'Mim Kehad and Melamedin, regarding redeeming one's firstborn. That's a mitzvah on the father, not on the mother. And so now we have Talmud Torah and Pidyon Haben. Those come together, and since you have two examples of something, we don't use it as a paradigm. So these are the exceptions to the rule that where women are exempt. Otherwise, women are obligated in such mitzvot. Hold on, that's acceptable, but look at the other side. Now that he puts Pidya v'Ribya on the other side of things that women are obligated to do, so now you have Pidya v'Ribya and fearing one's parents. Both are positive commandments, not time-bound. And since there's two examples, so that means we should limit it only to those two examples that women are obligated, but otherwise they are exempt. So now we have an opposite argument. So we answer, no, these are both necessary. And again, if we can show why it's necessary to have two, then you can use it as a paradigm. So we couldn't learn one from the other. If the Torah told us about Mora, fearing parents from the word ish avivimo tira'u, but didn't say regarding Pidya v'Ribya vayvarech otam, and then I would have thought v'chipshuha that Hashem also tells Adam to go and conquer, right? Meaning go spread out and conquer the world, and this is a way of men to go and conquer, and not the way of women. And so since being fruitful, multiplying, and is associated with spreading out and conquering, I would have thought that this applies only to men, not to women, and that's why I need for the Torah to tell me specifically regarding Pidya v'Ribya vayvarech otam that this applies to women also. All this according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Roka. And v'ikata Pidya v'Ribya v'lo kata Mora havamina ish desipek b'yado la'asot in v'isha de'en sipek b'yada la'asot la. If the Torah only said regarding Pidya v'Ribya, and I wanted to use that as a paradigm that all positive commandments that are not time-bound, women are also obligated, and it didn't say Mora, I would not be able to learn to Mora, because I might think that a son who has his time is his own, it's in his power to go and fear his parents and honor his parents. Yes, he's commanded. But a woman who most often she's married and now she's under her husband's authority and will not be able to decide on her own. I have to go and take my parents to the doctor, I have to do this and that, right? Because her time is not under her control. I might think that she is exempt. So I couldn't learn it from Pidya v'Ribya. And she can't do it. Maybe she shouldn't be obligated. That's why the Torah has to go out of its way to say that ish imo v'aviv tira'u, women are also obligated. She'll have to balance that with her husband, but otherwise, she does have a basic obligation to her parents. So since we could not learn one from the other, the Torah had to tell us regarding both of these, Pidya v'Ribya and Mora Ava'em, that women are obligated. So in both of them, they can be a paradigm for all other sources that women are also obligated. So we're good with Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. The proofs noted above, both for time-bound and not time-bound commandments, are acceptable according to the opinion that says that two examples that teach the same thing cannot be used as a paradigm if one of them, if they are extraneous, because that means it's limited to only those two. However, according to the other opinion that says that you can use them as a paradigm, even if one of them is extraneous, then what are you going to do? Because then, according to that, we have counter-examples, right? We have examples of time-bound mitzvot where women are exempt, but we also have examples of time-bound mitzvot where they are obligated, right? And also for non-time-bound, we have it on both sides. And so now it's not going to be clear. All of the proofs that we had before are not going to be usable. So we need another proof for that will work with this opinion. Amarava Papuna e yad ayla l'ta'ama deha milta. Rava said the sages of Pafunya, they have an explanation. Umanu, Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Who is that? Rav Acha bar Yaakov is a rabbi from Pafunya, and here's what he says. Amar Kera. Vayalecha le'ot ayadecha uzikaron ben anecha leman tiyeh Torat Adonai beficha huksha kol haTorah kula litfilin. Regarding tefillin, it says that it should be a sign on your arm and a remembrance between your eyes, so that Torah Hashem, all of the Torah, will be in your mouth. So you see, we use a hekesh now, not a simple binyan av, but this is bolstered by a hekesh that compares tefillin specifically to all of the Torah. That makes tefillin the super paradigm. Ma tefillin misvat aseh shazman gerama v'nashim peturot, afkol misvat aseh shazman gerama nashim peturot. So just like tefillin is time-bound and women are not obligated, so to all other time-bound mitzvot, commandments that are positive, women are also also exempt. And we can learn, infer from that the opposite, since for time-bound mitzvot they are exempt, therefore for non-time-bound positive commandments they are obligated. So we can actually learn everything just from this one, just from tefillin. Okay, so far so good. However, we always have to account for yet another minority opinion. All that would make sense according to the opinion, which is the majority, that tefillin is a time-bound commandment. But there is another opinion mentioned in Eruvin that says that tefillin is not time-bound. Rabbi Meir, who said that? It's Rabbi Meir. He thinks you can wear tefillin at night, on Shabbat, on holidays. So now we cannot use this as a paradigm for other time-bound mitzvot. But that's okay, because Rabbi Meir also happens to think that two commandments that teach the same thing cannot be a paradigm for anything else. So therefore, it's okay, even if he does not have tefillin, he still has re'iyah, coming on pilgrimage. That's time-bound and women are exempt, so that could be a paradigm for all others. And Rabbi Meir does not have to worry about eating matzah and hakel, that they are two verses, doesn't have to worry about them, because they are extraneous. You could learn one from the other, and therefore we cannot use those as a paradigm that women are obligated. Those are the exceptions where women are obligated and not others. And so that's how Rabbi Meir could solve the problem for time-bound commandments, and we leave even leaving tefillin out of it. So that's fine for Rabbi Meir. The other opinion that we've been talking about this whole time, now we're naming it, it's Rabbi Yehuda. He thinks that two examples, even if they are extraneous, you could learn one from the other. Still, you can use them as a paradigm for everything else. So matzah and hakel would be a paradigm that women are obligated in all such mitzvot. Utfilin mitzvot aseh shelo azman gerama. And Rabbi Yehuda also happens to think that tefillin is a mitzvot aseh that is not time-bound, and therefore we cannot use tefillin as the super paradigm. So what's going to be his source that misvot aseh shelo azman gerama, women are piturot, right? It doesn't have tefillin in the super paradigm, and he would say that masa and hakel, where women are obligated and they are time-bound, we can learn from those to all other commandments, and now women will be obligated in all such commandments. The answer is mishum dahabai masa simcha vehakel shelosha kedumim ke'achad u'shlosha kedumim ke'achad and melamedin, because we can bring in yet another one, not only masa and hakel, as we said before, but also simcha, the mitzvah of rejoicing on the holiday. He would say that is a commandment on the woman herself. And so now we have three examples that all are examples of the same thing. And even if you say two examples you can learn from, but the Torah would not go out of its way to mention three examples that are extraneous. And therefore, if the Torah is providing three examples, that means only those three examples women are obligated, but all other time-bound positive commandments, women would be exempt. We next ask about the next part of the Mishnah. V'chol misvot lo ta'aseh. Any negative commandments, women are obligated, except for three of them. So we ask, minahane mileh, how do we know that women are obligated in Lavim? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, v'chen tana deber Rabbi Yishmael Amar Kera. Ish o isha ki ya'asu mikol hatot ha'adam, hishva katub isha le'ish, l'chol onashim shebat Torah. This is in Bamidbar chapter 5, talking about a certain type of guilt offering. So offering someone brings for certain types of sins, negative sins. And it says ish or isha. Can't get more explicit than that. It applies to men and women. And so we're generalizing that just like in this regard, a woman would have to bring a sacrifice for these sins, so too she would be guilty for other lavim as well. So this could be a sufficient argument, source for the entire category. Yet we have two more pesukim, and we'll explain why we need them. Deber bi Eliezer Tana Amar Kerasher Tasim Lifnehem Hishva Katub Isha Leish Lechol Dinim Shebat Torah. This is in Parashat Mishpatim in the context of civil laws. It says these are the laws that you shall place before them, Moshe. And so before everybody, right? It equates everyone before the whole nation. So that's men and women are included, and that would be for dinim, for civil laws. Debeches kiatana amar kera v'mit ish or isha hishva katub isha leish l'chol mitot shebat Torah. A third pasuk is in the context of if my animal kills you, then I have to pay a ransom. Since this is an animal that was forewarned, and so really I would be guilty of the death penalty because I was negligent and my animal killed someone. But since I didn't do it myself and was not on purpose, therefore this is a case where one can pay ransom rather than get the death penalty. Nevertheless, since it says hemit ish or isha, here it's actually talking about the victim, right? The one who is killed, whether it's a man or a woman. And in this context, the pasuk says men and women are the same with regard to deaths, that one would be equally guilty if one killed a man or a woman. So death penalty, or rather guilt for death, right, applies to both. Okay, that's the third pasuk. Now, usricha, why do we need all three? If I only had the first one regarding giving a guilt offering, I would say, in order to achieve atonement, so Rachamana, Hashem says, a woman should also be able to achieve atonement. If only a man could and the woman couldn't, then that would not be fair. This is, of course, assuming that she would be violating a prohibition. These are bad things to do, kind of objectively. And now a woman who has would want to have atonement from that, and so she can bring a sacrifice as ish or isha. So since she can bring a sacrifice for it and should bring a sacrifice, then obviously she is guilty and she is obligated by the lav. Okay, so if I had only the first source, I would say, yeah, that's true for places where one has to offer a sacrifice. But regarding civil laws, I might have thought that maybe they only apply to men because they usually are conducting business, and women generally don't conduct business. Even in Roman times, there were definitely women who were rich and aristocratic and who were doing business, but it was more rare. So I might think that maybe the civil laws apply to men only and not to women. That's why I need the second. It's only a havamina. That's why I need the second pasuk to say it applies to sacrifices and also to civil laws. And if I had the second one, I would say, well, that's regarding getting a livelihood. And a woman also need a livelihood. Some are supported by their husbands or fathers, but some women work, and they can work, and then they can be involved in legal disputes. And so I would say maybe women are included only in the laws of sacrifices and the law of civil disputes. But when it comes to ransom, I might say, and now we're turning to the victim of the murder by an animal, that a man who is commanded in all the mitzvot, then the owner will have to pay a ransom if his animal killed a man. But if his animal killed a woman, maybe not, because she is not obligated in all the mitzvot. This is quite an astounding hava amina, to say that there will be less guilt for killing a woman than for a man. Well, it doesn't mean that they'll be exempt altogether. He still may have to pay liability in some other way, but both of them could be payment. It's just that this exact ransom and this mechanism may be different. Anyway, it's only a hava amina ve'i ashmi'ina, and so therefore we have the third pasuk to say not so. Killing an animal, killing a man or a woman has equal law, and the owner of the animal would have to pay ransom for his life no matter what. So that's why I need the three in going in that direction. And the other direction, if I had only the third one, then I would say in that case where someone died, so God cares about, look, there was a soul that was killed here, so ransom needs to be paid no matter man or woman. But in the other cases, maybe not. Without the pasuk, I might think that women are not obligated in civil laws or not obligated in those requiring a sacrifice. So sericha. So that's why I need those two as well. All right. So that concludes the proof both for misvot aseh and for misvot lo ta'aseh. Now we get to the exceptions. Chutz ba'al takif or ba'al tashchit. So we saw there's three exceptions that a woman, they're lo ta'aseh, and yet a woman is exempt. So let's go through each one. A kohen male is not allowed to become tameh lamet except for his relatives, but a bat kohen is permitted to become tameh lamet for anyone. How do you know? Dichtiv emor el kohanim bnei Aharon velo benot Aharon. Since that chapter is introduced in Vayikra 21, Parashat Emor, it says, go tell the sons of Aharon. We learn the sons and not the daughters of Aharon. So that one is clear. That's the first law that's actually mentioned in Parashat Emor, right? Lo yitama be'amav, and so on. So for sure, this applies to men and not women. So that is a law that we know. So back to this, Ela ba'al takif ba'al tashchit minalan. But the other two exceptions, what's the source for them that a woman is permitted to make a rounded haircut and to use a razor on her face, should she have some facial hair? How do you know that those two, a woman is allowed and only men are not allowed? Dichtiv lo takifu pe'at roshechem velo tashchit et pe'at zekanecha. This is the pasuk in Vayikra Perek Yod Tet. This pasuk applies to not only Kohanim, but to all Bnei Israel. But we're going to prove that it applies to men only. There's another pasuk in chapter 21 that applies to Kohanim that we're going to compare this to. Okay, so right now we're focusing on Vayikra Yutet that says don't make a rounded haircut. That would mean cutting off one's peot to make like a circular haircut like monks have, and also do not destroy the corners of your beard. So that would be like the corners of the beard, cutting that with a razor. So we make a analogy between the two. Anyone who is prohibited from shaving with a razor is also prohibited from getting a rounded haircut. But women certainly do not have a prohibition against shaving their beard with a razor. Therefore, they are not under the prohibition of getting a rounded haircut. So they are permitted in both. Now we analyze further. Wait a second. How do you know that women are not included in the prohibition against shaving their beards with a razor? Because svara deha'la it lehu zakan. One is, it's common sense. Women do not have beards, and so it doesn't make sense to apply, especially the pasuk says, zekanecha, your beard. It's not just do not apply a razor to your face, right? It doesn't say it like that. It says beard, and that therefore it applies only to men. And since that half of the pasuk applies only to men, so too the rounded haircut applies only to men. Good, that's a good answer. But if you want to not use reason, but derive from the pasuk itself, I'll give you another answer. Lo takifu pe'at roshechem velo tashchit et pe'at zekanecha. Medeshani kera b'diburet im ken nichtob rachamana pe'at zekanchem. Mai zekanecha zekanecha velo zekan ishtecha. So look how the uses a different type of terminology. For roshechem it uses a plural, but for lo tashchit pe'at zekanecha it changes it and makes it a singular. So what can we learn from that change to a singular? That it means zekanecha, your, speaking to a male beard, but not your wife's beard. That there's no prohibition there. And so from that change from Rosh Hashem to Zekanecha, you can prove that the prohibition against shaving applies only to men and not women. And then since it's back to back with the haircut, so then the rounded haircut also is permitted to women. Now, okay, so as we established it, now we have a problem with a braita. Vela v'atanya zekan isha v'hasaris she'elu se'ar harehen kezakan lechol dibrehem. A beard or facial hair of a woman and of a eunuch. A eunuch is castrated, so he doesn't have much testosterone, so he's not going to grow a lot of facial hair. Nevertheless, if they grow some hair on their face, that has the same law as a beard, even though you don't call it a beard, even though it's only a little bit, it has the same law as a beard for all matters. Now, when it says it has the same law for all matters, my love the hashchata, is this braita not including shaving with a razor? So now we have a braita. This is a problem. I mean, it's a problem for the, it goes against the Mishnah, it goes against the Pisukim that we just derived. So we have a big contradiction here. How could this braita say that it's prohibited for a woman to shave with a razor on her face, but it's prohibited, whereas the Mishnah said it's permitted, right? And when it says here it's the same, is it not talking about hashchata? Okay, our answer we're going to come to in a few minutes is that no, this braita is actually talking about the laws of negaim. You see, it has actually a tosefta in Masechet Negaim, so it's good to see it in context. If someone has a nega, a leprous spot on a beard, has a different laws than if you find it on skin. So really, that's what we're going to come. That's the answer we're going to come to. But right now, we're assuming that it's talking about the same laws regarding shaving. So what are we going to do with this? Amar Abaye, hashchata la masit amart. Abaye says no. This braita is not talking about the prohibition of shaving. Why? How do I know it's definitely not? The alif pe'at mi b'nei Aharon. Malala nashim peturot, afkan nashim peturot. So what's really doing now is bringing even more proof, in case you weren't convinced yet, that women are exempt from the law of prohibition of shaving with a beard. And this, we're bringing in another pasuk from Vayikra 21, right after the laws of becoming tameh, and right, which started off with, this is Parashat Emor again, and it says Bnei Emor elakon Bnei Aharon. So then it says Lo yikrechu kolcha berosham ufat zekanam lo yigalechu bibsaram lo yisretu saratet. So Kohanim specifically are not allowed to make a baldness on their heads. This also applies from Pasuk in Devarim to all Jews of non-Kohanim, but this one is specifically to Kohanim. And also, at the corners of their beards, they cannot shave. So here you go. This applies. This is the application to Kohanim. And so our point to bring it here is that we learn pe'at. We have a gezerah shava. It says the word pe'at here, right? Uf'at zekanam regarding Kohanim. And back in Vayikra 19, it says also here, lo takifu pe'at roshechem, and pe'at zekanecha. This one, pe'at. So you have a gezerah shava to teach me that just like the regarding Kohanim is talking about the men and not the women, so too in chapter 19 is talking about the men and not the women. So certainly women are exempt. Now, now, in that chapter, you may argue as follows, that why do I need this Gezer HaShava? After all, verse 1 of the chapter introduces with Bnei Aharon, and that applies, let's assume for now, that applies to the entire rest of the chapter, the laws of Tum'ah, and then the laws of shaving also. And so, we don't need the Gezer HaShava, you could leave out that extra word, and I could learn the same law that women are exempt from a Kal Vachomer. Ma kohanim sheliba ben hakotub misvot yeterot, ben Aharon velo benot Aharon, Yisrael lo kol sheken. If regarding kohanim, where the Torah gives them a lot of extra mitzvot, and yet those apply to men and not to women, so then for non-kohanim who are less stringent, all the more so, women will be exempt. If women are exempt from the strict laws of Kohanim, then certainly they will be exempt as non-Kohanim. And so I could figure it out just from the Kal Vachomer. Why do I need that Gezer HaShava? Lav Gezer HaShava Hamina Ifsika Inyan. If not for the Gezer HaShava, I might have thought that the word Bnei Aharon in chapter 1, in verse 1, applies only to the first section of becoming Tameh, and that's only for the men, but women are allowed, Bat Kohanim are allowed to become Tameh. But I might have thought that the next pasuk is a new section and applies equally to men and women. That's why I need the Gezer HaShava, Pe'at, to teach me that just as in the context of Bnei Israel, it's men and not women, so too in the context of Kohanim, it applies to men and not women. Good, that's why I need the Gezer HaShava. All this was a setup. However, Hashta Nameh Nema Hifsika Inyan. Once you say that there's a possibility that the chapter that Bnei Kohanim applies only to laws of Tum'ah, well, you know what? I'm going to try to bring back that argument, and I'm going to say yes, it does stop there. And then the Gezer HaShava that you proved, I can use the Gezer HaShava for something else. V'mishum Gezer HaShava miba'eleh lechedetanya. We're now going to quote a braita, midrash halacha, that's going to use the Gezer HaShava for something else. And if you use it for something else and also assume that Bnei Aharon applies only to the first law of Tum'ah, then we're going to leave open the possibility that women are obligated in the prohibition of shaving, at least Bat Kohanim. And that will support the braita, and that will go against the Mishnah. So we have to solve this problem first. Okay, but we have to go on this tangent of learning this braita that will give us the details of the laws of using razor. So we're noticing Lo Yigalechu, the pasuk in Vayikra 21 in the context of Kohanim says do not shave. The pasuk in chapter 19 regarding all Yisrael says Lo Tashchit, do not destroy. So they're slightly different to teach us important laws. So Lo Yigalechu Yechol Gilechu Misparam Yeh Chayav. I know you're not allowed to shave. So does that include using scissors? Because scissors are also used in shaving process. And so would that also be liable if I trim my beard with a scissor? That's why it says do not destroy. Destroy meaning completely cut it off down to the skin. Only that's prohibited. If you use scissors can't cut so closely. So therefore scissors are permitted. You can trim your beard. You just can't destroy it altogether and go all the way down to the skin. Now if I had lo tashchit, I would think if besides using a razor, a regular razor that's used for shaving, I might think that using a carpenter's plane, right, it's usually used to make wood smooth. I wouldn't want to put that on my face. But the question is, if you use such a thing on your face, or tweezers, would that be liable because it does cut down to the skin or pull it out altogether? That's why the other pasuk says don't shave, only in a normal manner of shaving. If you use an unusual tool, that's not included in the prohibition. So hakesad, so what is prohibited? Giluach sheyesh ba hashchata heve omer zetar, has to be a normal utensil used for shaving that also cuts it all the way down to the skin and destroys it. What is that? A razor. Therefore, only a razor is prohibited, but trimming, cutting a beard with other utensils is permitted. So you see, I need a Gezer HaShava between the two sources, right, so that I can connect them together and learn all these laws. So imken. So now we use the gezer hashava up, and that leaves open the possibility that the prohibition against shaving does apply to a bat kohen. Imken. So we answer. Imken nichtov kira et shebizkanecha my pe'at zekanecha shema'amina terte. If it was only to learn this gezer hashava, it could have said that which is on your beard, right? It could have said that in both pesukim, right? Just here, lo tishchat et shebezekanecha. It wouldn't have to say pe'at zekanecha, and here also it could have said just berosham and leave out pe'at. Zekanam. So you don't need the word pe'ah in both places. And so the extra word pe'ah means that we can learn two things from the zekanecha and zekanecha. We can learn the gezerah shava here, where we learn the different utensils and only a razor. And from the word pe'ah, we learn that just as women are exempt in one chapter, they're also exempt in the other chapter regarding Kohanim, so women are totally exempt. Now we finally concluded once and for all that surely women have to be exempt. It's not just that the Mishnah said so and against the Braita. There's absolute proof from the Torah that women are exempt from the prohibition of shaving. Therefore, what are we going to do with the Braita? So the Braita says that the facial hair of a woman or a eunuch have the same laws for all matters. What does that apply to? No, it's only talking about if someone has a leprous sore on one's beard, the special laws of nega on a beard apply to men and women and eunuchs alike. And different from regular skin. We treat it as a beard sara'at, not as skin sara'at. Good. Tumat nega'im behedjakati v'ish or isha kiye bo naga berosh or bezakan. Hold on, that's an explicit pasuk. I don't need a braita to teach me that. The pasuk says a man or a woman who has a leprous sore on their head or on their beard. So clearly, it's going to refer to. It's referring to facial hair of a woman. So a braita wouldn't have to say that. Ela mamozutra letaharat negaim. So Mozurat explains. No, it's talking about the cleansing process, the purification process applies to men and to women. We ask about that. Taharat negaim name peshita kevanta batumahi bataharahi. But that's also obvious. If the Torah says that a woman can get sarat of the beard, become tameh that way, obviously she can also take part of in the purification process. Wouldn't make sense to say she can become tameh with beard impurity, but she has no possibility of becoming tahor, right? If you include her in one, then you necessarily include her in the other. Amina listadim ketiv ish o isha kiye bo naga berosh O bezakan hadar atan leish kamashmalan. So you know why I need the braita? Because from the pasuk it's actually not totally clear. I might have thought that I can read the pasuk separately as follows: for a man or a woman, if they have a nega on their head, and that applies to men and women. But then o bezakan applies only to men. You could possibly read it that way, and think that the entire law of leprosy, tuma and tahara, does not apply to women, and that's why Braita wants to clarify that you should read the pasuk to include them both. And this anyway solves the problem. The Mishnah is correct and verified. Women are not obligated in the law of shaving with a razor, and we've proven that from Pesukim. And this Braita is actually in the context of Nega Sara'at and is telling us that don't think that even though a woman is mentioned in this pasuk, that women are not obligated in Nega Sarat. It's not true. They are, right? It says Rosh and Zakan. So this Braita is talking about Nega Sarat, where women are equal to men and has nothing to do with the law of shaving. Okay, lastly, isi tane af bal yikrehu nashim peturot my tama di isi. So according to isi, women are exempt also from bal yikrehu. This is a different topic now of pulling out one's hair. This would be over grief. When someone was in mourning in the olden days because a loved one died, they would express their mourning by either lacerating themselves, making cuts on their skin, or pulling out their their hair and making themselves bald. The Torah prohibits these actions. Now, when it prohibits these actions, does that apply to women also? So Isi says that Bali Kiddushin does not apply to women. Why? What's the source? Banim atem ladonai Elohechem lo titkodedu v'lo tasimu korcha ben einechem lamet ki am kadosh ata ladonai Elohecha banim v'lo banot lekorcha. So he derives it from this pasuk that says, "You are children of God." It says banim, so that sounds like banim and not sons, and does not apply to daughters. Now the idea of the pasuk is because you are sons of God, so our bodies are holy. Hashem gave it to us. Hashem is there for us, and while we should be sad for losing a loved one, we shouldn't we should not pull our hair out, right? Hashem is there, and have faith, and so on. Okay, so there are two laws: lo titkodedu, do not gash yourselves, and do not make a bald spot between your eyes, literally on your head, because of a dead person, because you are holy unto God. So that's where we learn that this applies to men, and it does not apply to women. That's not a good idea for women to pull their hair out, but they don't have a prohibition to pull their hair out. Now we ask, wait a second, this banim atem, you see that the first thing that comes right after is lo titkodedu, do not make gashes. So maybe I would say that women are exempt from are permitted to make gashes. That's what it's talking about, banim velo banot. How do you know it's applying to the korha of making a bald spot? Because at the end of the pasuk says, you are all a nation, a holy nation. That applies to men and women. So that's including women. So something has to be included. So when it says banim, and that includes men and not women, that must apply to making a bald spot. Now we ask the obvious question: why are you including women in the prohibition of gashing and excluding them from the prohibition of making a bald spot? If anything, you'd think the opposite. When it says banimatem, so this applies to men only and not women, that should apply to the immediate next words, lo titkodedu, do not gash yourselves. So gashing should apply to men and not women. Period. And then the next half of the pasuk, also don't make a bald spot because you are all holy. So that should apply to everyone, men and women. Wouldn't that make more sense in terms of the syntax of the pasuk? And the answer is no, I'm going to include the more comprehensive law of cutting. The prohibition of cutting applies both where hair grows on your head and where hair doesn't grow anywhere, on your arm, your leg. You're not allowed to cut yourselves anywhere. Since that's a broad prohibition, that's the one that must apply to men and women. And the one that we're going to exclude from women's obligation is making a bald spot, which only applies in a more limited place, only where hair grows. So yes, we're going to have to read the pasuk in a bit out of order way, but that's what makes sense. Wait, why not say that the sons and not daughters applies to both prohibitions? And so women are allowed both to pull out their hair and to cut themselves. And maybe when the pasuk says you are a holy nation and therefore you can't do these things, and that applies to men and women, that's referring to a different prohibition, a prohibition that's mentioned in Vayikra 21 regarding Kohanim, that they're not allowed to scratch themselves, right? There's two related prohibitions, but they're a little different. Lo titkodedu means don't gash yourselves, meaning totally cut yourselves with a utensil, and sirita is referring to scratching oneself with nails. And so I might think that the Am Kadosh Atah L'Hashem Elokecha is coming to include men and women regarding the prohibition of scratching oneself. That's where women are not allowed to do. But regarding gashing oneself, maybe I would think that should be the same. as pulling out hair, and women are permitted to do that. So why not read it that way? And that way you can take care of him. Kam kadosh, you could apply it to something else, and you don't have to apply it to either of these two. And the answer to that is kasabar isi sirita gedida ahati. Isi thinks that the prohibition of scoring and cutting are all one prohibition. They're just two different aspects. You can't scratch yourself, you can't cut yourself, but they go together. And whoever is obligated in one is obligated in the other. If you're exempt in one, you're exempt in the other. And therefore, you can't just say, oh, Am Kadosh only applies to that. It has to apply to both Sirita and Gedida. Women are not allowed to cut themselves or scratch themselves. That included in that prohibition. And so once we use the Am Kadosh for the lotit godedu, that leaves the lot tasimu korcha, tearing out one's hair, that would connect with banim, applies to men only and not to women. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen ve'amen.